Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another NIA Center Virtual Connect event. Just want to remind everyone that this event is being recorded and it will be available to watch again on our YouTube page. So just to give a brief overview of what today's and this month's focus is, the purpose of this event is simply to just tell a story. And how this specific story we've chosen today relates to our mission and focus areas is number one, here at NIA Center, we are all about creating a space. We firmly believe in the power of just giving people a space so that their history or traditions or their passions have a place to be talked about, explored, and shared with others. And really what we're doing here today is we are connecting with the community. So before I get too far into that, I do have some news from NIA Center. So first of all, hello, my name is Tiana Hawver. I'm the Executive Director of NIA Center. I just really jumped right in there. And the news I want to share with you is that this weekend, we are having our annual My Story 4 event. So My Story 4, as it sounds, is the fourth iteration of the My Story event series. And these series are all about creating a space, highlighting an artist of color to talk about issues that are affecting the African-American community today. And this weekend, which ties in a little bit to our lovely speaker story today, this weekend is all about celebrating African-American women. So we have an art exhibit of 20 faces. Some of them are local, some international, some you may know and some that you don't. But we have 20 women, 20 lives, 20 stories being retold and immortalized in beautiful watercolor by nationally known visual artist John McDonald, who did used to teach at Kendall. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. We are selling tickets to the event, tickets available on our website, $10 for members, $15 to the public, but it is part of our commitment to equity to never turn anyone away if you are unable to purchase a ticket to our event. So if you are interested, curious, and if you want to purchase a ticket or just show up, I encourage you to visit us this weekend for My Story 4, and that is at the Embassy Suites and Hotel in downtown Grand Rapids. That is this Friday, noon to 7 p.m. or Saturday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. So I really hope to see a bunch of you there. And with that, I'm going to introduce our lovely speaker, Tiana. So Tiana is a transracial adoptee and has spent her life with one foot in two different worlds. She has spent the majority of her life in white society, while the last 3 years have been spent reconnecting with birth family and discovering her full self. Tiana is an accomplished speaker and recently earned her master's degree in communication from Grand Valley State University and has also produced a documentary on reconnecting with her birth family. So with that, Tiana, I'm going to turn it over to you and you can talk for as long as you want, as long as it needs for you to tell your story to us today.
Well, thank you so much, Sierra, for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of my story, and I'm super jazzed about this weekend and thinking through, okay, do I have anything on the calendar so I can hopefully make some space to head over to the Embassy Suites Hotel and check this out, because it sounds really, really good. So my story begins in 1971, and I was 4 months old when I was adopted by a white couple who lived in Mason. And for those who may not be familiar, Mason is in the Lansing area. It's a rural community, and but near Lansing. And so my parents decided before they got married that they wanted to be able to provide a home for children who may be considered hard to adopt or hard to place. So somebody wouldn't necessarily immediately think, you know, when they're open to adoption, okay, yes, this is a child that needs love and a family, and I'm willing to do that. They did not have a bunch of stipulations. They just wanted hard to place. That was pretty much it. So in 1971, a Black infant was considered hard to place. Typically, as probably a lot of your members may know, within the Black community, adopting a child outside of your family is not how that works. Typically what happens is someone within the family is going to take the child in, whether that's we're just doing that on our own, or if let's say social services gets involved, they step up and say, you know, we will take care of this child. In my particular situation, my birth mom had a lot of things happening in her family, and she did not feel that that it was going to be safe for me to go with family. And so in her mind, her option was, all right, I will keep her brother. He will stay with me. But this little girl, I'm going to need to find somewhere for her to be. And it was not very long after I had been adopted that she thought, I think I made a mistake and I should not have done that. But the way things were, it was too late. There was nothing she could do. It was closed adoption. They didn't even have open adoption, was not a thing. That was not an option at all. And so she spent all of this time like wondering where I was I okay? Did she make the right choice? What was my growing up situation? Was I even living? She was hearing horrible stories about the foster care system and what was happening, particularly to Black girls. And so, you know, she spent all this time wondering what was happening to me. She ended up with a long military career, was in the Air Force and retired Air Force, raised my brother. And, you know, all of that family is from Birmingham, Alabama. Well, I grew up in my white family where my mom and dad also adopted my sister, who is part African-American and part Vietnamese, and then a brother who is African-American. None of us are biologically related. We all are from different families. My parents even took the step once all three of us were adopted that they thought, you know what, we need to be in a place where our children are in a place where they see people that look like themselves. And it's not so much about us being where we're comfortable. And so we moved to a rural town called Remus, which is in Michigan. And for those who are wondering where in the world is Remus, it sits in between Mount Pleasant and Big Rapids. So if you know where Ferris State University is, which is in Big Rapids, and you know where Central Michigan University is, which is Mount Pleasant, Remus is in between those two locations. It is a place where a lot of people came when they headed north when slaves were freed and they were given property. So you'll hear people talk about the old settlers, and that is one of the places where they were in Michigan, is in the Remus and Mecosta area. And so my parents bought 20 acres and we grew up in an area where that was actually pretty diverse. So you had a lot of interracial marriage that was there, white families, of course, that were there. But where we went to school, there were people that looked like us. There were people that looked like my parents. So we lived in a very diverse place, but we also had a lot of opportunities to be in touch with our Black cultural roots. So, you know, we were exposed to chitlins and greens and all of that stuff that a lot of times when people talk about soul food, that all we were exposed to all of that. But that's because my mom and dad made that choice of taking us to somewhere where we would have people that look like us. And they weren't interested in necessarily the inner city as a place. And so they had some friends that told them about here, and that's why they moved to Remus. Fast forward a lot of years to 2018. And I was at work one day when a phone call came through, and it was a confidential intermediary calling to let me know that my birth mom was trying to find me. Now, I had decided a long time ago that I was not interested in connecting with birth family, that I really was happy with the family that I had. I had a mom and dad, things were going well. So I didn't really, I was not, some adoptees really struggle with wanting to know where did I come from? Where's my family and my connection? They really need that. And that wasn't something for me. I just never had that draw. However, as it turns out, there were so many things that light bulbs turned on once I did connect with birth family. Looking at how friendships were so important to me growing up. A lot of times, especially when a child is as young as I was, you don't necessarily figure or think about it being a traumatic experience. I mean, they're 4 months old. I mean, that's pretty fortunate to be able to be adopted as an infant and, making those bonds that happen within a family. However, even at that, because that isn't the natural order of how things are supposed to go, it still impacted me. I couldn't put words to it, and I didn't notice that was what was happening. So for me, it was always in the back of my head, how do I make sure that this friendship doesn't end? If somebody's mad at me, then what do I have to do to try to pull it back together? Even if the reason they're mad had nothing to do with me, it wasn't my fault or anything like that, you just start to own that as it being you. And it goes back to the fact that you were abandoned. Even though she was trying to find me, at the end of the day, that's what it is. She left. And so that is something that all adoptees, they're not the only ones who experience it, but a lot of times people will think, oh, well, if they're transnational adoptees, so they're coming from another country, oh, that's so fortunate they were adopted and are here in the United States, or they were really little when they were adopted versus maybe, elementary school age, where there's a lot more that they've had to deal with up to that point. That when they're much smaller, that people tend to think, oh, they're so fortunate, and they think this is all such a great thing. But a lot of times, especially in transracial adoptions and even transnational adoptions, you'll have some adoptees that really are not in favor of that. They're not in favor of not being connected with their family. And some that it's not an issue. So it runs the gamut in terms of those types of feelings. For me, I felt like my life was good. Everything was fantastic. But when I started connecting with my birth family, light bulbs, like I said, just started coming on, where I realized, oh, this is why I responded this way to these situations. Really recognizing where that was coming from, which then for me also means, all right, so now I've got some work to do, because I don't want to carry that around. I want to understand when I get triggered by it, okay, I recognize what that's from. And so then I can, all right, let's talk truth over it versus acting out of what this feels like in the past. So connecting with my birth family, I took a couple of weeks before I answered yes or no about meeting her, because there's all these questions about, well, how's that going to work? What's that going to look like? What does she want exactly from me? Why now? I'm in my late 40s. Why is she coming after all this time? Why not back when I was 21 or turned 18? Well, I decided, okay, well, everything is just fear-based. All of your reasons for why you don't want to do it are based on fears, things you cannot control. So let's take those out of the equation. And so then what does it mean now if you decide that? And I thought, okay, well, I don't really have anything to lose then, I guess, if I'm going to take fear out of the equation. So I decided to go ahead and connect with her. And it has been the best thing. So because of connecting with her, that meant connecting with her son, Jay, my brother. And that also meant when I went to visit her, because she lives in Memphis, when I went to visit her the first time, I was able to get information to connect me to my birth father, who actually still lives in Michigan. He lives in Detroit. And so I've gotten to meet my birth father. I've gotten to meet my brother on that side of the family. I've met other family members on that side. I've met family members on my birth mother's side, and it has been fantastic. It's not always been easy, but I wouldn't trade it. As much as I was afraid about how's this going to look, and is she going to want to take over? Is she going to try to be my mom? I already have that. It's not what I need. I would not trade having made that decision for anything. Yeah, it's been one of the best things. And as you talked about in my bio, it really has helped me connect more with the Black side of myself. I talked about having a foot in two worlds. I grew up with white parents, so there were a lot of things in life that I experienced because my parents are white, but I didn't think of it as that was why I was experiencing them. I just thought, well, you know, some people get to do it and some people don't, but it never occurred to me. Or just even how some people that my parents knew, the way they treated me versus a Black person they didn't know. That I was getting, basically, I was being covered by their privilege. And I didn't really think about that until, you know, being on my own journey of what does it mean to be in a diverse community, multi-ethnic, multicultural, connecting with my birth family, all of that. You start looking at things very differently. I look at opportunities that I had that my brother Jay didn't have, or just the things that I wasn't exposed to in my adoptive family that I would have been exposed to had I been in with my birth family, and looking at what would my life trajectory have been like would I have still been getting a master's degree, or would that not have been, because I would have had other things going on in my life where that wasn't a focus. So yeah, that whole discovery process has been absolutely something I wouldn't trade.
Right. And I love the way that you kind of put that. It's like having, you know, your foot in kind of both worlds, and then understanding that because of your, you know, adopted parents, like their cultural capital or their white privilege, and understanding that, you know, you received some of that and that you're conscious about it, and how that has affected your life. I think I normally try to ask more questions during these things, but honestly, you're such a captivating speaker, and I love this story because the story really kind of illustrates that there's more than one way to be a person of color. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I actually do have somewhat of a similar experience. I also grew up, you know, predominantly in a white family. I'm from a smaller town, and I also kind of, maybe not to the extent that you did, but I also went through this, you know, reckoning of, I have experienced privilege, and I should not only be conscious of that, but I should use that privilege to uplift other people of color who did not have that experience because of where they lived or their parents or whatever. So I didn't expect this story to resonate with me so much today. Like, I'm kind of
it's interesting because I have people say that. Even my cousin and I even had a conversation about how much even the abandonment piece resonated with her, not because she's adopted, but because her parents got divorced. And so when her dad moved to northern Michigan up in Charlevoix, she remembers that feeling of, I don't want you to leave. And she's like, I was an adult. So like, what is that about? So she and I have had that conversation too. So it's always interesting to me to hear how my story resonates with people from so many different aspects and walks of life. And I'm somebody who loves story. Story is important. It helps us know more about a person. And it also puts a face on it where you can't just dismiss or look at the surface and make an assessment and say, this is who they are. That when you hear story, it changes the whole thing, because like you were saying, there are parts of them that resonate with you, or are just like, wow, I didn't expect that, or I never would have guessed based on what I'm looking at, that this is the path you've walked to get here. And it's so important, especially today, where a lot of times we aren't interested so much in hearing someone else's story. We just want to get our point across. And I think a lot of the dialogue that we see in social media and some of those things would change if we would just, let me hear your story. Let me hear you share.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think something else that people may experience too is that sometimes you just don't have the words to express your story, or maybe, maybe you're just scared of what people may think, or maybe you don't even want to confront like that other side of yourself or that side of yourself. And the reason that I love doing and hosting these virtual connect events is because just so often they're just stories, just people like you from the community that has something they want to say. And then to be on the other side of that, the receiving end, and being able to hear, I learned something today, or, maybe I should speak up about my own story, things like that. So I just have to thank you for coming on here today and sharing, your story of finding your birth family. I think that, this is about you. This isn't about me. I do have some questions though. I want to be sure that we get to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. However you need this to go, I'm
Yes.
free flowing with you.
As you can see, we do keep it pretty casual around here.
Yeah.
So something that we do here at NIA Center is that we tend to focus pretty heavily on art as a medium to tell a story or to address an issue. And I want to talk a little bit about your documentary, and I want to ask you, how has art kind of helped you in your journey or to tell your story?
It has given me a platform to be able to share what I've experienced, and may be typical for some adoptees, may be atypical for other adoptees, when it comes to reconnecting. Because some never thought they'd have the chance, but really want to. Some are like me that never planned to do that. And a lot of times when people talk about that in society, you get one of two things: either, oh, that's great, that's fantastic, or you get the other side, which is, I'm not sure that's a great idea. Sometimes adoptive parents feel very threatened by the fact that their child wants to connect with birth family, or there's that opportunity. And I wanted to just have that space where I could talk about what my experience was, let them know that there's ups and downs to it, and that every adoptee has the right to make that choice on their own when they're ready. And that adoptive parents don't need to be afraid of their child connecting, because especially if it doesn't go well, the adoptive parent is the safe place. That's the fallback, if you will. That's not quite the right word, but that's the place that they've grown up and they know they're loved and they're cared for. Hopefully, that's been their experience. And they know that if they get rejected, when they're very conscious of it, as an adult adoptee, and you are trying to do this reconnect and it does not go well, that is the place they are going to go back to, is their adoptive family. And that's the place where they have to know they can land here, and it's the soft place to land. And that regardless of how this goes, we are here supporting you. And that was my experience with my parents. They said, whether you decide to do it or not do it, we're here. So this was a way for me to actually open it up to hearing the story from a birth mom, adoptive parents, my perspective as an adoptee, and what that can look like, or what that was for me, and have some dialogue and be able to share and for people to hear from a few different perspectives on it.
Right. So kind of going off of that just a little bit, what would you tell to someone who may be considering, reaching out to their birth parents, but they're having that internal conflict, is this a good idea? Maybe their adoptive family isn't on board. So how would what would you say to that person that's kind of struggling and is leaning more towards, I don't think I want to reach out?
Mm-hmm. I would say, whether you decide to do it or not, if possible, there are adult adoptee groups. I know that there are some in Michigan. The Michigan Adoption Collaborative is available, and that is specifically for adult adoptees to be able to connect, so that they've got some resources, and also people who know the experience because they're also adoptees. For somebody who's considering and they're on the fence about it, I would say make sure that you have a good support group. So that's kind of why I talk about this, this collaborative, is because you need a good support group to just bounce ideas off. And people who are not going to shoot something down because they're in their own fear about the decision. And then I think also just whether they can hear it in the moment or not, but letting the adoptive parent know, listen, whether I decide to do this or not does not change my relationship with you. My relationship with you is set. It doesn't change because I potentially add birth family to the picture. And I think that's what some parents struggle with. And then for somebody who's like, I'm really backing away, that's totally okay. There should be no pressure whatsoever to feel like you have to connect with birth family. That's not a foregone conclusion and an automatic. So definitely feel free to say, you know what, I'm just not feeling it. And that's totally okay. To absolutely say, I'm out of that. That is not a place I want to try to do. And that's fine.
Right. Because everyone's at different places, different situations, right? Mm-hmm. So before I kind of close us out and go over, those updates from the beginning of the program, I just want to ask, is there anything else that you want to share with our audiences today?
I would say that tell your story. Like, find places to share it, even if it's just like small little snippets, even if it's just journaling it. If you're into writing or recording your voice talking about your story, because it also helps you get comfortable with your own story and what you have to share, because all of us do have something that we can share about ourselves that impacts those around us. So it's so important to be able to talk about where we come from, who we are, and even just knowing it, even if we're not necessarily sharing it with a big audience, being able to know in ourselves, this is who I am, this is where I come from, because it also helps us know where we're going.
Absolutely, 100%. So thank you so much for coming, telling us that story, sharing those resources, and giving us some advice as well. You are a phenomenal storyteller, and I want you to send me, if there is a link to your documentary, I would be interested in watching it and maybe sharing it with our audience as well. So with that, I will just again repeat, if you are able, please consider coming to the My Story for Art exhibition this weekend. That is Friday from noon to 7 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Embassy Suites and Hotel in downtown Grand Rapids. We will be going over 20 different successful African-American women who we have immortalized again in beautiful watercolor, thanks to John McDonald, who is our featured artist. So thank you all again for tuning in. Tiana, thank you for being here. And I hope to see at least some of you this weekend at My Story 4. Thank you.